having a parking structure in the middle of Hollywood. I also want to thank Travelers Bookcase for having the books available. So don't forget to pick up a copy at the end of the event, and Chris will be signing also for your. Sorry, I am a little nervous. Yes, so this is the first event that we do from 106, where it's not a 106 event, and it's a way of giving back to our members. And with that, I want to introduce my co-organizer, Dennis, who will tell you guys a little bit about 106, followed by the rest.
Thanks once again to the IRLA team for hosting us in this beautiful space. Thanks, guys. So, about 106 Miles, we're a network of startup founders, engineers, and friends of startups. We're probably one of the larger networks of startups in the West Coast. We're about almost 6,000 members strong between our Palo Alto chapter and our Southern California chapter. So we're growing our memberships. We'd like to invite each and every one of you to join our meetups. We have meetups in Santa Monica, in Pasadena, West Hollywood, and Orange County. So that's really it. Like Sasha said, it's our first organized event, so we'd like to thank Chris Guillebeau and Chris Garten and his entire team for hosting this for us. Thanks a lot, guys.
Hi, welcome to IRLA. So just, you probably have no idea where you are or what this is about, right? No? How many IRLA members are here? So these are people to talk to afterwards if you want to know more information. But basically, we're two things. We're a membership, curated community, co-work space, representing the convergence of tech and entertainment. So it's tech and entertainment people working in proximity to each other to kind of accelerate the convergence. And then we are a incubator where we invest in startup companies. So a class of 5 startups, we give $25,000 each, take 8%, mentor them with our incredible list of mentors, which you can see on the website. And for 3 months, and then put them in front of investors, high net worth individuals, and VCs and whatnot, and then create bidding wars and fund those companies. So those are the two things all working, all happening in this space, and then we do a lot of events and whatnot. So if you have any questions about membership, you're all clearly potential members. You can talk to me or anybody else here and get cards and whatnot, and then email us and come for a real tour and a full explanation. But welcome, we're very excited. I can't wait to hear Chris, CG, my fellow CG, talk. So without further ado, here he is. Chris.
LA. It's great to be here. Great to see so many amazing people. I really do appreciate Dennis and Sasha and everyone else from 106 for making this possible. They are the reason I'm here tonight, so I do appreciate that. Thank you. And also, again, Chris, thanks for opening up the space. It's beautiful. I see a lot of co-working spaces, but I don't think I've ever seen one as tricked out as this. So, awesome. I did about 35 cities earlier in the year with a $100 startup when it first came out, and then took a little break and did some other stuff in the summer. And I'm just now getting back out on the road to meet readers and talk about different things about the book, but not just the book, also about the broader concepts of freedom and empowerment and entrepreneurship, what that means in different ways. So we started last night in San Diego, and honestly, very excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Is there anyone here who's traveled more than an hour or so to be with us? Yes, I know LA traffic. Philadelphia, that's great. That's a long way. I go to Philadelphia.
That's really far. Oh, hi.
Oh, hi. Great to see you, Julie.
Thank you.
How's Jason?
So good.
Awesome. Anybody else?
From Hawaii.
From Hawaii? You rode a bike from Hawaii? That's awesome. You rode your bike from Culver City. Excellent. Well done. See you. Anybody else? Well, everybody else just LA traffic. I experienced that today in San Diego. Awesome. So if we haven't met before, if we haven't been to $100 Startup event or an Art of Non-Conformity meetup, I really do say that the best thing about the evening is not this formal space where I'm kind of presenting to you, but it really is everyone else who comes out. And so my remarks will be relatively brief. I'll talk for maybe 15 minutes or so. I'll tell you why I wrote the book and a few stories from the book, what I hope will come out of it. Then we'll do question and attempted answer, QAA. Sometimes that goes better than others. I'm sure it'll be awesome here tonight. And then we'll just hang out, and I'll sign books there if anybody wants to do that. But mostly I encourage you to meet someone else if you haven't done so already, because everyone here is awesome. That's all I got. By the way, are there any other authors here tonight? Let's still a copy of this book for a second. Anyone else got a book? Karen, I just talked to her when we go. That's good. How about anyone who started a business? Okay. Pro entrepreneur group here. Anyone built a website? Everyone? 3/4? Awesome. So, whenever you begin a big project, like any of those things, I think it's really important to decide for yourself what success is going to look like. And decide for yourself, what's the goal? What am I working here? What am I working for? As opposed to letting someone else determine what that success is or make that decision. And in the case of writing a book, it's important to understand to whom you're writing, what the message is, as well as perhaps to whom you're not writing. Who is the real audience for the book or the project, whatever it is. And in the case of $100 Startup, I got some really good advice from my editor when we began the project about 3 years ago. And he said, Chris, you use this word entrepreneur a lot. And I'm not sure everyone knows what you mean. Because in some of the circles that you travel in, maybe in tech-friendly circles or on your blog, people understand what you mean by entrepreneurship. But for a lot of mainstream America, the concept of entrepreneurship means different things. And some people are intimidated by the idea of being an entrepreneur. Not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And when people think of entrepreneurship, they sometimes tend to think about Silicon Valley and a traditional startup. They think about how they can recruit investors, how they can spend a long time planning something that will eventually lead up to a big launch. And that's one model of startups. But that's not what $100 Startup is about. And when we talk about business, quote unquote, when a lot of people think about business in mainstream America, they think about wearing a suit and playing golf and voting Republican, and that's what it means, right, to be a business person. And that's not what $100 Startup is about. So, my goal in writing this book was to not write a business book. It's not a book about managing your employees better. It's not about that Silicon Valley model of startup. It's essentially a project for people who are seeking freedom. And it's written for anyone who wants more freedom in their lives. It's written in some ways for the dissatisfied. It's written for all those people who are struggling in their jobs. Maybe they hate their jobs, or maybe they don't hate their jobs, but they would like the idea to do something different. They would like more opportunity. They'd like to create more security for themselves, their family. Or even if they're very happy in their work, they realize that the world is changing. They realize that they might need new skills. They like the idea of going to work or going to that job because they want to, not because they have to. So it's for everybody who's kind of already motivated to make a change. They want to do something different. They're ready to take that next step. They don't necessarily know what the next step is. So the first group of people is that dissatisfied group, or that group of people seeking change. And the second group is everyone who's just struggling to compete in a difficult job market, especially young people, but really people of all ages. I don't know how it is here, but where I live in Portland, Oregon, and certainly many places all around the country, it's not unusual to find all kinds of overqualified and overeducated people doing somewhat menial jobs. You know, so you go to the coffee shop and the barista has a master's degree, or sometimes higher, and that's not unusual. You know, that's becoming very common. And in Portland, last year, there was a job announcement for a receptionist position that paid $13 an hour with no benefits, and more than 300 people showed up to apply for that job. You know, and many of them were college graduates. So when we have situations like that, you know, it used to be if we would meet someone who was highly educated and who wasn't able to find work in the field in which they trained, we would think, you know, maybe they've just fallen on hard times, maybe they're just kind of bad luck, or maybe they need to try harder, you know, maybe they need to send out more resumes, or they need to get on LinkedIn, you know. But I would suggest when we have these situations where there's all kinds of people, you know, who have plenty of education, unable to compete in the job market, so they're either unemployed or they're underemployed, you know, they're working at jobs that don't offer a lot of advancement, I would suggest that something with the system is broken, and something is just not working. And a lot of people are going to have to make a different choice, and I actually see this as a positive thing, not a negative. I actually see it as a very encouraging sign that a lot of people are kind of stepping back and saying, you know, I don't necessarily want to send out hundreds of resumes and compete for this, you know, one interview that may or may not lead to a job that has advancement potential. You know, I want to take matters into my own hands. And so the story of the $100 startup essentially is the story of a lot of people from all over the world, all backgrounds, who have done exactly that. It's the story of unexpected or accidental entrepreneurs, people that didn't go to business school, people that in some cases did not even intend to start the business that they ended up operating and earning a good living from. And so the best way to tell you a little bit more about that in just a few minutes is to tell you the stories of a few of these people, of how this came to be. So when we began the research process for the $100 startup, we cast a really wide net. We said we want to hear from people, you know, from everywhere, all different backgrounds, as I mentioned. We want to hear from people who've started all kinds of businesses, so lots of online businesses, but also offline as well. So very diverse, but we also had some specific characteristics, you know, that you had to meet to be in the study. So the first characteristic was your business or your project had to make at least $50,000 a year in net income. And a lot of the projects did much more than that. We had lots of people with multiple six-figure incomes, some higher, but we set $50,000 a year as the baseline to say, you know, this is actually a profitable project, it's not something you just do for fun. And then the second thing related to that was you had to be willing to share all the details about your business, including your finances. So you had to be willing to talk about how much money you made from the project and how much it cost to start up, you know, what went well along the way and what didn't go well. And the reason we did that is because, again, I wanted to provide something that's very specific. I didn't want to provide a resource that was just kind of, you know, general or motivational. I think those things are fine and they provide a purpose. But I wanted to provide something very specific, so we asked people to, you know, include all that information. For the most part, everyone in the study had fewer than 5 employees, and a lot of people were operating their business as a solopreneur, or a business of one, which is how I run the business as well. There's a very strong emphasis on independence and freedom, and the desire to not necessarily build, you know, a huge company or not necessarily make a ton of money, but to create something that could support a lifestyle and support a family, or create something that, you know, the person could work on it as much as they wanted to, but they also had time for a life as well. So a very strong emphasis on freedom. The last thing was, for the most part, all the businesses that we looked at had to be operated by people with no special skills. And what we mean by that is not the lack of skills at all, but it means, you know, no specific technical skills or skills that would require a lot of additional education, you know, to achieve or something like that. So, for example, there was a guy in the book who started a coffee shop. He was originally from Seattle, but he moved to the South to start this authentic coffee shop in South Carolina. He didn't know much about running a coffee shop beforehand, but he kind of learned and transferred that, you know, knowledge with him as he went. On the other hand, I heard from someone who said he had taught himself dentistry, And I said, that's great, good for you, but I'm probably not going to put it in the book. I don't want to get sued or anything. So, no special skills, at least $50,000 a year, often more, full disclosure, finances, diverse, range of studies. And from there, we had about 1,500 responses. Went through a lot of data and spreadsheets and calls and interviews. Narrowed it down to about 50 to 70 studies, 50 to 70 stories that appear in the book. And at that point, I had my own bias for stories that were interesting or stories that were reflective of the times in which we live. And the book begins with the story of Michael Hanna. And Michael was a 25-year media sales veteran. He'd always worked in the same career for a couple of different companies, and he was good at his job, had a family. And one day, a few years ago, he went to work, and he was planning his meetings and pitches and schedule for the day, and he got an email from his boss asking him to come and see her. So Michael went into his boss's office, and he sat down, and the first thing he noticed was that his boss did not look him in the eye. And she said, Michael, as you're aware, the industry is kind of in decline right now. We've had to make some difficult decisions. And Michael said, at that point, it was like everything happened in slow motion. And he said, I had heard stories of this happening to other people, and we had seen some of our colleagues get laid off. But until that moment when I lost my job, I didn't really know what it felt like. I didn't know what that experience was like. And there was an HR person who kind of showed up, gave him a box, and he had to pack up all of his things, right away and leave. And on the way home, he called his wife, Mary Ruth, and he said, honey, I'm sure it'll be okay, but just letting you know I lost my job today. Everything was okay for Michael, but not in the way he first expected. So Michael thought, okay, I'm a good worker, this is a shock, but I've got a great work history, I've got good references, solid skills, I'll just get another job. And so Michael started doing everything that he's supposed to do. He called up his former colleagues, sent his resumes out, he used LinkedIn. But he noticed a couple of things fairly quickly. First of all, his industry really was in a decline. There weren't a lot of companies hiring. And second of all, he wasn't the only person out of work. There were a lot of good people looking for work. And so Michael began to get a little discouraged. And one day, a friend of his who owned a furniture store called him. And his friend said, I know this is kind of random, but I have a truckload of mattresses that I don't want. Maybe you can take them and sell them, one at a time on Craigslist or something. So Michael thinks about it, and he calls Mary Ruth again, and he says, honey, it's a long story, but is it okay if I buy a truckload of mattresses? And she says, whatever, Michael, just stay out of the house for a while. So Michael buys the mattresses. But instead of selling them one at a time on Craigslist, he had noticed, while driving around all of these fruitless interviews, he had noticed a car dealership that had gone out of business. And because of the economy, there weren't a lot of car dealerships moving in. There weren't any. And so Michael thought, maybe I can contact the developer. Maybe I can get this space, really cheaply. And Michael didn't know anything about mattress stores. He thought they were kind of, high-pressure places where you didn't want to go. So Michael decided to create an unconventional mattress shop. And he created a family-friendly environment, children's play area, coffee bar for adults, and then he started the world's first mattress delivery by bicycle service, which you can see on YouTube. It's very popular. And delivering bikes all over town. And 2 years later, this is now $1 million business, the Mattress Lab. And I talked with Michael a great deal, for the book, and then a year later when the book came out, I went back to him and said, are there any updates, anything that you'd like to share? And he said, it's really funny. If you had asked me a couple of years ago, if you had told me that I'd be running a mattress shop, I would have said that's the craziest idea in the world. But I've really come to enjoy the role that our store plays in the community. I really enjoy having my family involved and seeing families come in, to shop for beds or cribs, for their kids. really enjoyed it. And the other thing he said was, when I got laid off, it was a shock. It was a hardship, but it turned into the greatest thing that ever happened to me. So I'm so glad that that transition came along and kind of forced me, to look at different things, forced me to make this change. I talked with a lot of people like Michael, and not all of them had been laid off. Not all of them went through this unexpected kind of change, but almost all of them, in one way or another, had started this business accidentally or unexpectedly, or kind of stumbled into it as they pursued something that they were interested in and something that they could find that was valuable to other people. So I talked with Susanna Conway, for example, who's from England. And Susanna was a former journalist. She was also a photographer. And so one day she decided to create a mini photography course just for her friends and family. And everyone enjoyed it. So then Susanna offered this course to her extended network on Facebook. And she wasn't a famous blogger. She didn't have thousands of followers or anything. But everyone that she knew on Facebook signed up for the course. So she thought, maybe I have something. Maybe I can kind of build this a little bit. So over the next year, Susanna kind of built this up on the side until it made $90,000 a year, which was more than she was making as a journalist. And so when I talked to people like Susanna, I had to learn to kind of adapt my questions because I wasn't talking with traditional entrepreneurs, if there is such a thing. So I would say things like, what did you not foresee when you were starting a business? And Susanna said, I didn't know I was starting a business. I just thought I was doing something fun, and it turned into this thing. And I talked with Finney Lewis, who now makes a living traveling the world and learning languages and teaching other people through this special method that he's devised. And I asked him, at the end of one of our talks, I said, is there anything else I should know about your business? And he said, yes, please stop calling it a business. I'm just having the time of my life. I'm doing something that I enjoy, and I'm fortunate that I found a way to connect something that I enjoy, something that I value, with something that other people value, with something that other people find valuable enough, in fact, to pay for. And so, in one way or another, all of the stories that we looked at in $100 Startup are people who have found that particular convergence. They've found that blend of their own skill and their own passion, but not only that, they've found a way to merge that with something that's desirable, with something that's valuable in the marketplace. And that's how they have created this success for themselves. And my goal in writing the book and then going on the tour and meeting readers and putting this out, my goal is to do a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to share these stories because I was personally inspired by many of them as I talked with people and heard about what they were doing and how they created these different successes, and lots of people who were earning $150,000 a year or $200,000 a year or more from something that they had created in a relatively short period of time. I was inspired and I wanted to share the stories. But then secondly, I wanted to craft a narrative around the stories and create a blueprint that other people could follow. Other people who are seeking that kind of freedom for themselves. And those people who either want to leave their jobs or want to establish something on the side or just want to have more security, or those people who are struggling to compete in this difficult job market. I wanted to provide that kind of resource. So I mentioned in the beginning that it's good to define your own success. And for this project, in my mind, the $100 Startup will be successful if it does three things. And the first thing is inspiration combined with action. So I hope that people who read the book, who enjoy and appreciate the message, I hope that they will not only be inspired, but I hope they will do something about that. I hope they will not only say, oh, I read this book and I enjoyed it, I hope they would say, I read this book and then I took action and did something different in my own life. And I started my first $100 Startup project, or I improved an existing business, or I applied an idea or even a single example to something I'm already working on. I hope that people will really take action instead of just really being inspired. And the second thing I hope for is to provide a specific educational resource. As I mentioned, there's a lot of other resources that are out there that are encouraging people to go for it, and I think that's great. But when you're ready to go for it, where are you going? How do you get there? What are the steps? So The book is an attempt to provide 300 pages of next steps and lots of very specific, data-driven examples and checklists and modules and all of that. And then the third and final thing that I hope will come out of the book and all of this experience that we're having jointly here and elsewhere, I hope that the project will create a sense of urgency among those who read it. I hope it will challenge people to take action, not just at some point, but soon, immediately. Whenever we talk about entrepreneurship in any form, it's always good to say that entrepreneurship per se is not new. Entrepreneurship, micro-commerce has been around since, at least since people have been buying and selling or exchanging things. I used to live in West Africa with my wife for about 4 years, and I could drive my Land Rover, into the interior of Sierra Leone. And if you go to the village in West Africa, everyone is an entrepreneur. Everyone is buying and selling and making their own way because there is essentially no formal employment. But the difference is, if you live in the village in West Africa, you can pretty much only buy and sell, with people in that village, or at least that surrounding community. And that's slowly beginning to change for many parts of the world. But certainly for all of us, we have the opportunity to connect with people, not just in our own village, but all over the world based on shared values, shared ideals, and shared worldview. And that's a remarkable thing. So because it's a special thing, I think it raises the question to what is our responsibility? We have all these opportunities, there is so much possibility, so what can we do about it? With my first book, The Art of Non-Conformity, I encourage people to think about what I call the two most important questions in the universe. And the first question is, what do you really want to get out of life? What do you want? What are you working for? Because a lot of people don't know what they want. I think it's good if you can figure it out. But the second question is, what can you offer the world? What can you offer the world that no one else can? What is specific to you? So that's that question of contribution, of engagement, of participation. And I'm glad to see that people are doing that in different ways. And as I talk with all the people whose stories ended up in the book, as well as many other people, as well as some of the people in our community, I find them to be living examples, of this model that we can, make a good living doing something that we love. We can make the world a better place at the same time. And so I like something that Steve Jobs said before his death. He said, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. And whenever I talk with people who I find, kind of living their life according to that ideal, I also walk away inspired. And I've been inspired by many of you already tonight. And once again, I really appreciate Chris and everyone for having us in this space. Thanks to 106 and all of you guys for making this possible. And thanks to all of you for sharing this evening. Thanks a lot. I think a couple people brought cupcakes as well. Over there, if there's any pizza left.
I can take the microphone around and use this one. People want to ask questions. You guys, anybody have questions for Chris? If you do, there's a hand.
Book's awesome, everybody.
You're awesome.
Thanks, man. We all good? Anyway, my question is, I guess, what do you think is the best way to really reach out to people? Like, if you're starting something, you're looking for a customer base or people to just participate, what medium do you use?
The best way to reach out to people and how do you start? Well, in some ways it may depend on the project, but I would say in general, the best way to reach out to people is to start with the people that you know, right? And sometimes I hear from people who say, well, I don't know anyone, and the answer is yes, you do, probably, and you know people who know other people. And so I'm a big fan, again, it depends on the kind of project, but I'm a big fan of what I call the small army model. So I say I have this small army of remarkable people, and the way I began my project 4 years ago I was thinking the same kind of thing. I was like, I've got this idea, I want to do something, but who do I know, and who's going to care? And I wanted to write books, but how does one do that? So I started a blog, and I wrote to anyone that I knew. I sent individual emails, to people that I had worked with in Africa, or people I had gone to grad school with, or friends. And I said, I'm starting this project, and here's what it's about, and I'd love for you to participate in it if you'd like. If not, I'm not going to bother you. But I start there and give people a reason, give people an opportunity to do something. How can they participate? Can they join this list? Can they subscribe? Is there something else they can do? Can they tell people about it? And then as the project kind of builds, if you're inspiring some degree of trust and loyalty, if you're giving, keep the focus externally. Something that I learned a lot in the beginning is, I write sometimes about visiting every country in the world, which is one of the projects I'm doing. And some people care about that, and other people are like, how does that help me? Which is a good question. So I learned to focus, a lot more externally on things that could hopefully be beneficial to other people. And then issuing a series of invitations. Okay, you want to do this? Is there something you can do? Tonight is an example of, people coming together not just to hear about this, but to meet one another through this process of engagement and invitation. So I don't know if that helps you with your specific project, but
That's great. No, that's perfect.
you have a question? Okay, over here.
So I would imagine to write this book, you'd be most helpful if you were an author and an entrepreneur. Did you consider yourself an entrepreneur before writing it? And did writing this book and researching it change how you define yourself?
Yeah, great questions. I've always been self-employed for the most part, and the reason for that is because I'm a terrible employee. It's not because I'm especially smart or anything. I walked away from my last job when I was 20. I was working in the middle of the night at FedEx, and it wasn't a great experience, so I just left, which was the normal protocol for leaving at FedEx. No one ever gave notice or anything. And then I had to learn to support myself. I had to I didn't have any aspiration of starting anything big. In the beginning, my motivation was how can I support myself? How can I get by or do whatever it is that I need to do without working a job? And so I learned. I sold things on eBay. I imported coffee. I learned how to build websites. I learned how to do affiliate marketing and Google AdWords and all these different kinds of things. I never did them very well. It's important to say. I never built a huge business or anything. But for 8 years, I was able to support myself and my wife when we were overseas and doing different things. So I don't know if I'm an entrepreneur per se, but I'm definitely lean toward self-employment and independence. Now, as to what I learned through the process, as I said, I really was inspired and challenged by many of the stories that I heard because you often hear a couple of stories, but I just kept hearing story after story, and that's what I thought was really interesting, because if you only hear a couple of stories, you can always think that person has some kind of advantage, or I can't do what they've done because of X or Y, but you keep hearing different stories, and I heard about single mothers, who were making $10,000 a year and then built a project to make $100,000 a year. That's very inspiring, Heard about retired people or people in different walks of life who then were able to start a business to create more that's created for themselves. So I kind of walked away from it thinking, this is great. How can I, number one, tell their story well, and then number two, what am I trying to build? What am I trying to do? So those are some of the things I've been thinking through over the past year. Yes.
So you mentioned as you were interviewing people, they kept saying, don't call it business, or I'm just having fun, or this is how you're, whatever they used to describe it. And essentially it is a business no matter what you call it. Is there any terminology that's popping up to be more specific, to kind of get to the collective consciousness of that's what this is?
Right, great question. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Not everyone said this is not a business, right? That's just a couple of examples. Some people were more deliberate, about it, and some people, you know, in some ways I was, you know, I told a story about Michael losing his job, and that's a great story, but in some ways I was even more inspired by people who had a day job, who, you know, had a relatively stable day job, didn't necessarily want to leave it, but deliberately took steps, you know, to create a successful side project so that they could have, you know, either more income or more opportunity in the future. So I think those people would probably call it, you know, some kind of business or a side business or micro project or something. I guess in some ways, I'm not sure if the terminology matters so much, but I do believe that the entire concept of micro-entrepreneurship, whatever it's called, is becoming much more, I don't know if it's mainstream yet, but I think it's becoming much less on the fringes, you know? And so I think it's, for many of us, when we hear different stories of people who started a project, you know, and they left their job, they're doing well, or they sold it or something, it's no longer incredibly unusual. And now we say, well, that's great, and I can think of somebody else who did that too, you know, and so I think that's a good thing. Someone in the middle had a question over there.
Hi. I read your book. I think it's really awesome, and I read a lot of books, so it's a good book. But
thank you very much. I'll give you the money later.
But my question is kind of a random one. Like, how long did it take you to write the book, start to finish?
How long did it take to write from start to finish? The total process was about 2 years, but that wasn't a writing process. You know, a lot of that was research and interview process. Probably the main writing portion was 4 to 5 months, and then maybe another 3 months of editing and working through different rounds of reworking things. I use, you know, free tip for any writers, take it or leave it. I try to measure my work or my output based on outcomes and deliverables as opposed to based on time. And so the way that I wrote this book was, you know, I had a contract with Random House. The contract says the book needs to be 60,000 words. So I think, okay, 60,000 words, how do I break that down? You know, I know from previous writing experience I can write about 1,000 words a day, you know, maybe 5 to 6 days a week. Okay, so the book is not going to write itself in 2 months, but nevertheless, if I kind of set this quota for myself, you know, I've got 12 chapters, you know, each chapter is 4,000 words or so, I can kind of break things down, and that really helps me a lot to kind of go through it. And if I wasn't sure what to write next in a certain chapter or section, I didn't worry about fixing that, I went on to something else, and then just started writing that. And then later I'd have that process of going back to it. But I feel like maybe a lot of people get stuck writing books or anything extended because they can't move forward from one place, and so they just stay there. And I think, at least for me, it was better to just kind of get as much of it out as possible and then fix things later on. Are you a writer?
Yeah.
Are you writing a book?
Oh yeah, I'm writing a book about like how kids can go to college. I went to school for 3 years and I didn't have to pay for it, so like how you can kind of do the same thing and like hit the system, get the most out of school without.
Hit the system.com, is that it?
Yeah, well that's an idea, you know, how you can go without taking out massive loans.
That's a great idea. That sounds very marketable as well, right? Because it relates to a core economic need, as well as an aspirational need of going to higher education. So, somebody's already registered at hitsystem.com. I
can feel it.
Yeah.
I don't really have a question as much as an observation, because what wasn't mentioned is there are entrepreneurs like myself, I've been doing this for over 20 years, but in the service industry, which is not freedom. And what was great about your book is it shows you how to make a transition out of any situation that you don't have the freedom that you want. And the biggest thing I wanted to thank you for is that it's completely non-hype. Mostly everything out there on the internet, off or online, is so hype-filled, it wears you out. And that was great. It's very practical and actionable.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. A lot of people did talk about, you know, you can create a job for yourself just as easily as you can go and get a job for someone else. You know, like, so you do have to be careful in that you're actually creating something that is legitimately providing that freedom and independence or whatever it is, you know, that you crave. So a lot of people talked about how to kind of get out of that trap. You've written books, haven't you, Doug? Did you have something to say?
I had a question for you.
You had a question? Okay, you had a question, and then there was one over here too.
Sure. So you mentioned you're a solopreneur.
Do you collaborate or do you hire freelancers? How do you decide when to bring in extra help to delegate so you can keep focused on what it is you want to be doing and keep the freedom?
Great question, and I think the answer is different for everyone. I really do. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all answer. I guess one answer would be you bring other people in when you hit your own ceiling, when you're no longer able to do the things that you want to do, or when you find yourself dreading certain tasks. And that's when you do lose the freedom, and it becomes much more like a job. At the same time, other people that we talked with in the study met that same ceiling, and instead of choosing to scale or expand, that's essentially what you do then, they kind of chose to regroup and say, the purpose of my business is not necessarily to create this big thing. Maybe I just need to do less. Maybe I need to kind of deliberately say no to different things. So it's a question of personality. It's a question of goals. Total lifestyle goals, not only business goals, but also what do you do with what you want to do with your life. There's a good story about the Tom Bin luggage factory that makes laptop bags and messenger bags. They have a factory in Seattle. It's a low seven-figure business now. It's doing great. But they've had the opportunity numerous times to sell their bags at REI and Walmart and different big chains like that. And they deliberately chosen not to do it because of various concerns that they had, even though that would bring them a lot more money. So as for me personally, I collaborate a lot. I don't have any employees or assistants. So I have some great people that I'm fortunate to work with, but there's no one that I'm actually responsible for paying a salary, telling what to do every day. I'm not very good at that myself. Some of you are probably very good at that, and that's great. Over here.
I have a lot of myself. My question is, when did you know that you were an author? Like, is it something you always knew about yourself? I just started writing a book, and I'm completely shocked.
Why are you shocked?
I never ever thought that I would ever write a book.
So you just woke up one day and started writing?
I thought that my life story was interesting and that I should tell somebody and that they would write it, and then I got tired of waiting.
Okay, great. How many of you have blogs here? Okay, you don't have a blog?
No.
Okay, so my answer, I was talking with Sasha about this earlier. She was around somewhere. There she is. We were talking about this earlier. My own answer for that was I had lived overseas for a few years. I had been self-employed doing all the random things we discussed. I had traveled a lot. I was beginning this project of going to every country. So I had all these kind of things, but I felt there was no connection point between them. I felt there was no convergence. I was like, it's good that I can do this, but what am I really, like, what's the point here, And I was turning 30, and was thinking about all this stuff, and that's when I thought, okay, I want to create a platform. I want to actually, share something with the world and see where it goes from there. So that's when I started writing. And I started writing on the blog, and then I wrote the first book, and I found I really enjoyed communicating in that method. Good luck with the work.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, one more question, maybe one or two more questions, but I don't want to keep you guys a long time here. So,
through this journey of working for yourself, are you surprised by what you're good at? Like, have you discovered things about yourself that you're good at that you never knew before?
It's a very insightful question. Jody is smiling at me for some reason. I would say it's been a big change, for sure. It's definitely something that I'm an introverted person. I used to kind of I would travel for 10 days at a time, not really spend a lot of time with other people. I certainly didn't do things like this, but it was really good for me when I started meeting people who connected through the blog or through social networks. It changed the entire course of my project, and it changed the whole vision for the project for the better. So I don't know if I've gotten better at anything, but I think I'm a better person for having started it. So I'm a big fan of starting things. I really encourage you if you or anyone here's trying to think about something. It's like people always, always ask this question about timing. People always worry about timing the system, and they always worry they're late for something. They're always like, oh, I had this idea, but 2 years ago it would have been great, or something, or I think I'm too late because everybody else is already doing this, or there's already books or blogs or businesses or whatever, in this space. But when people say like, what's the right time to start something? There's a quote from Seth Godin I really like, and Seth says the best time to start was probably last year, but failing that, today will do. So I'm glad I started. So Sasha was.
Forgive me if this was asked already, but what have you lost or sacrificed to get around?
What have I lost or sacrificed? In life?
Taking this route.
In this project, okay. I should probably say, firstly, and honestly, I don't feel like I have sacrificed a lot. And I feel like it's been great that I could do it, and I wanted to do it, and I did, prioritize. Whenever you do a big project, you have to kind of say, okay, I'm going to do this project to the exclusion of other things, right? And so maybe there were other projects or other things I could have done, in place of this focus, over the past 2 years. But I'm really glad that I chose to do it. So I don't think I could honestly tell you that I experienced a sense of loss or sacrifice over this project. It's a great question, though.
I think we'll take one last
question.
Anybody? One last question?
My question is about the charlatan who's not known and the hustler, and I was wondering if you could expand on how you use the other towards the hustler, and it's an example.
Great. There's one more: the charlatan, the hustler, and
it's the charlatan, unknown, and the hustler.
Yeah, it's called the unknown. What is it?
Well, the charlatan is the one who speaks a lot that doesn't have any skills, and then the unknown is the one who has skills and doesn't really speak very much. And the hustler is
right. So he's referring to an illustration in the book that comes from a great artist, Joey Roth, about the difference between it's all in the section about communicating about your work. Someone asked about getting the word out about things. My philosophy on hustling in the business is, do the work, make something that's great, but then don't be afraid to talk about it, right? And so a charlatan is someone who's kind of all talk. The charlatan is someone who's like always promoting something, but never actually making something that's worth talking about. And we all probably know people like that. If you're on Twitter, you might follow some people who are like that. Right? And then whenever you see the link, you're like, oh, that guy, needs to do something, But there's also people, and I forget the term that Joey used in the illustration, there's also people who do really great work, but for whatever reason, they're not able to talk about it. Or they have some hang up, or they think like it's not their place, or whatever it is. And so the model that I encourage people to do is kind of a blend. It's like, yes, do something that's great, but then don't be afraid to share it. As for how you determine what it is, it's kind of a fine line, but I guess if you're going to err, you should err on the side of making something that's great. I try to divide my time as an author, blogger, whatever it is that I do, roughly 50% creating. So that's creating books or blog posts or products or resources or whatever, and then 50% connecting. So connecting is broadly defined. Connecting is email, social media, meetups, whatever. So it's just a rough ratio. It's like I want to make sure I'm spending, enough time working on my stuff and then enough time connecting with people as well.
I'd like to thank you again, and please let's give this a round of applause.